Hi, we are back with another video. It's the first chapter for class 8, which is in the science stream, crop production and management. It's a pretty lengthy chapter, so we will break it down into subparts. Right, let's get right into it. So, what we have learned so far is that there are two essential categories from which the humans are going to derive their food. One is going to be the plants, one is going to be the animals. Now, as we have progressed further, we have been able to grow the food that we want. All right, which leads us into the science of what we call as the science of agriculture. Agriculture involves growing or cultivation of plants, as well as it involves the rearing of animals. So there are two aspects to it. One is the growing of the plant, the other is having the animals, which would be either for food or it would be for other economic reasons. Like you can sell them for meat, you can sell them for wool and loads of other stuff. So these two elements are going to be comprising agriculture as a broad term. What we would be looking into in detail in this particular unit is going to be about how the plants are grown, how they are actually cultivated, what are the steps that are involved right from preparation of the field to the sowing of the seeds to the harvest. Okay. So on the first page, it talks about the fact that obviously the plants can make their own food. We need the food essentially because to carry out the basic life processes, we need to have energy. The only source of energy for any heterotroph is going to be taking food from an autotroph, and that's going to be the plant. Now, we are a large country. We obviously need a lot of food to feed all the mouths. So there is a constant strain with respect to growing more and more food from the limited resource, which is going to be the land. The land's not growing, people are, and the demands are. So it puts additional strain on the system to generate more and more of edible food product, which is being constantly conflicted with cash crops. So there are many types of crops that can be grown. One is going to be the food crop, which is essentially the stuff that we are going to eat. There are going to be staple foods, rice, wheat, grams, fruits, vegetables. At the same point of time, the same land has to be grown to generate money. So those plant products which are entirely grown for cash purposes, the farmer now has a choice between them. Now there are other types of food crops, crops as well, which are going to be plantation crops, or there could be horticultural crops, but we are not really going to be getting into it. But the reason why this chapter has been devised essentially is for you to really appreciate what goes into getting these food crops and the entire process that is involved with respect to this. Moving further, what is a crop? So the first term that you need to understand is a crop. So any plant that is being a single plant, a single type of plant in fact, that is being grown over a particular land plot is a crop. So you can have a field of wheat crop or a rice crop, coffee, anything. All right. So an interesting term that has been described in the book is about being a nomad. So initially, while the civilization was being started or getting established, we would just, the human beings in fact, not we, the human beings would just take and pluck anything that was growing on the plants. And as the system started to get established, we got into the habit of cultivating these plants. and that's how the process of agriculture started. Okay, now we have to understand that obviously for a plant to grow, there would be some ingredients that would go into it. So one will obviously be the seed that will one day grow into a plant, plus there has to be soil. Now the soil has to be fertile enough to support the growth of the plant. Then there will be weather conditions. Now in weather conditions, obviously one big factor is going to be about the temperature. So the stuff that can grow on icy plains is not going to be the ones that is going to be growing on a normal level plain area. You are not going to be really having wheat cultivation happening at the top of a mountain. At the same point of time, in the dry and arid areas of a desert, you can't expect rice to grow, which demands a lot of water. So weather conditions will determine what is going to grow. And India, being per se so geographically rich, is going to have, commanded by these weather conditions and the different types of soil, different kinds of staple fruits in different areas. Now, an important concept that comes here is of the seasons and how different food types are grown in different seasons. So in India, there are going to be two main seasons in which the plants are grown, which is going to be the Kharif crop and the Rabi crop. So Kharif and Rabi. Kharif essentially is summer and the Rabi is going to be the winter crop. What is the time duration? It's going to be from June to September. June, September, which is the rainy part. The monsoons are in this part, and the stuff that's usually grown as a Kharif crop is going to be paddy, maize, groundnut. And the other is going to be the Rabi crop, which is essentially the winter season, which is going to last from October to March. And the most important thing that's grown during this time period is going to be wheat. Could be peas as well. The other examples that have been given is mustard fields, the yellow ones. Summer will also support the growth of various types of fruits and vegetables. Why is this distinction important? Because the kind of food that is being grown in the warm temperature is different from what is being grown in a cold temperature. You can't find wheat growing in the summers of May. It's not possible for the wheat. It requires cold temperatures, and it requires a bit of rainfall at the very end before the time of harvest comes, which we get usually as the late winter rainfall in the northern parts of India. Right, so we have basically understood that there are two types of seasons in which different types of crops are grown, and the reasons why the different crops are grown in different areas, commanded by a lot of external factors, okay, which would obviously influence the kind of food the people are going to eat, and that becomes their staple food. Now, we are going to talk about the practices into the crop production. Now, the whole process of cultivating a plant is going to be an agricultural process, and process will have various steps, and we need to understand each and every step to get the ultimate product. So let's just dive into it. So the first and foremost is going to be preparation. For any exam, there has to be preparation. For any process, there has to be preparation. And same is the process when we are growing the plants. So this is preparation of the soil. Now how are we going to do that? Soil is going to be pretty hard and chunky in the dry season. As the time of sowing of the seeds will come, it is important to loosen the soil. Why? Because first and foremost, the plant roots cannot penetrate through dry and a hard soil, right? So one thing is to help with that. The second thing is that once the soil is actually loosened, it would have more aeration, and that would allow the roots to breathe, which helps with the growth of the plant. Also, when we are going to loosen it, essentially what we are doing is that it could be done with the help of a tractor, it could be done with the help of a plow. Various instruments would be used for the same. You're basically turning the soil, you're mixing the soil. Now soil has got various layers. The topmost layer is going to be the humus and the compost, and then there is this topsoil. So essentially this is the topmost part of the soil. Below this is going to be sand and clay, which doesn't really support plant growth. Below this is going to be the rocky part, which again does not have organic matter and does not support the plant growth. The plant growth is supported by the topsoil, which actually is only a few centimeters. Now this topsoil is rich in nutrients. What kind of nutrients are we talking about? They are organic and they are inorganic. Now when I say organic, basically they are carbon compounds. From where do they come? They come from the decaying plants, they come from the animal waste, they come from the microorganisms that are growing in the soil, they come from the small insects and the earthworms and small beings that are there and die in the soil. The inorganic, there are various elements that are important for the growth of the plant, like nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. So all of these combine together and are going to be the nutrients for the growth of the plant. But importantly, they are only present in the topsoil, and that needs to be churned around, if you were to say, for the seeds to have them available for the plants to grow. So far we have talked about that we need to loosen the soil, essentially because it allows deeper penetration of the roots. It helps with the aeration, and once the farmer is doing the process of churning the soil or mixing the soil, they can also add humus to it. Now what is humus or manure? That's going to be the organic decayed parts of the plant and the animal waste, so as to improve the fertility of the soil. Okay, we need to add these supplements essentially because each time the plants are growing, they are eating away from the nutrients of the soil, and that needs to be replaced, which is done externally by the farmer. There are natural processes as well, but then because we have to consistently deliver with respect to the good production of the plants, it is important that these nutrients are being replaced each time the cultivation happens. Now, moving further, what is this process of churning or preparation of the soil actually called? It is called plowing. So plow is basically the hull. Okay, in Hindi it's called the hull. You might have had seen the stuff, a wooden thing which is attached to the animals, the cattle, and as they move in the soil, a part of it gets stuck in it and it rips through it. So this part is attached to the animal, and as the animal moves forward, this is the iron metallic part. This can be wooden or metallic. It keeps on ripping the soil. Now obviously that's a very primitive method of doing it. It can be attached to a tractor and it does the same purpose. Now moving further, they have in your book very categorically mentioned about what are the various parts of this plow. So the stuff that's going to be attached to the animal's hump is going to be called the beam. This is the shaft, and the part that goes into the soil is called as the plowshare. It's just important because it's mentioned in the book. Now the other instrument that's going to be used is called the hoe, H-O-E, and what it is, it's essentially a small, you can say, modification of this plow. So it's essentially a large stick or a rod with a bent metal attached to it. It's just like a metal plate. Now it could be a simple metal plate like thing, or it can have fork like projections. What is it used for? Again, it's used for the same process of tilling, or it could also be used for taking the weeds out. Okay, moving further, now we have got the cultivator. So what's a cultivator? It's just a mechanized form of the plowing method. It's a tractor having this plow attached to it. Okay. Now, if any machine is going to be involved in any process, obviously it's going to save time, labor, and what's going to be done in days is going to be done in hours. Now, before the soil preparation is done, if the soil is very dry, it can always be moistened with some water so that it's easier for the plow to go through it. Now it's not very difficult to imagine that once the plowing is happening, there would be like the soil would be broken down into large chunks. So they also have to be broken down into small grains. Unless and until we actually get a granular form of soil, the aeration part doesn't work out. Okay, so that would again be a part of the preparation of the soil. So if the soil is very dry, you get big chunks per se of the mud. Then that part also has to be broken down further so that it's actually pretty granular and easy for the small soft shoots coming out and the roots coming out from the seeds to grow into. Okay, so what we have learned so far is preparation of the soil and the reasons for it, which were aeration, which were proper mixing of the topsoil, mixing of the nutrient rich part of the soil, mixing of the organic waste and the animals and the microorganism, essentially the insects, so that the richest part of the soil is ready for accepting the seeds. Okay, moving further, it talks about sowing process. So when we talk about sowing, we'll finish off with sowing and then we will move on to the next part. What does sowing mean? It means laying of the seeds in the soil. Now, how is this going to be done? First and foremost, you need to have proper seeds for it. These seeds should be good seeds. You don't want to be sowing seeds which are decayed or infected. How would you know that? A very crude way of doing it is that if you were to take the seeds and put it into water, the healthy seeds are going to sink down because they are heavy. If they have been infested by insects, or any sort of a pest, then they will be light. So they will be empty from inside, and empty things are going to be light, and they are going to float on the surface of water. So very simple way is to take seeds, put it in a bucket of water, see whatever is floating that has just rejected right away, and we get the seeds which are good quality, and the farmer can use them. To have better production, obviously the farmer can use modified seeds. They are genetically altered seeds which always ensure that there is going to be high yield. These are available usually through government agencies, and they are called high yield seeds. They ensure that the farmer gets the best return from the process. Now, how is this sowing going to be done? It could be done manually. You take the seeds, you plant them, but that's obviously a tedious process. Now with the mechanization, like for plowing, similarly the tractor could also be used for sowing. What are the tools available? The tool's name is seed drill. There is a very interesting YouTube video which demonstrates how the seed drill works. Essentially, there are going to be small boxes in which the seeds are going to be put in. These boxes are going to communicate into, if you were to say this is the large seed drill, these are the small compartments. Seeds are put into them, and as the tractor is drawing this part, the seeds are going to trickle down through these fork-like projections and get embedded into the soil. Okay. What is the important thing that we need to consider while sowing the seed? One thing obviously was that the seed has to be healthy. The second important thing is that the seeds are not spaced very close to each other, because if there is overcrowding of the seeds, they will compete with each other for the nutrients. If one plant is growing, it will cause shadow onto the other, which doesn't help the plant growth either. They will compete for water, they will compete for the soil. So we have to appreciate that the spacing between the seeds is uniform. When we use the machines to do it, it usually is uniform. But when manually being done, we just need to ensure that if they are too close together, it will be problematic and the output will not be good. The third thing that we need to ensure is at what depth are we putting them? As we told, that it's the top layer of the soil which is the most fertile part of the soil. So if they are put in too deep, they won't be able to come out and grow. Simultaneously, if you just throw them right on the surface, they can be just picked up by the birds. So they have to be at an appropriate depth for the proper cultivation to happen. Okay. Right. One important aspect that has been discussed in your book about sowing is that sometimes the seeds are not directly put into the soil, but in fact they are grown in nursery into small plants or plantlets, if I were to say. Why? It saves around about 25% of water. Second, you already have grown the seed, so you know that the plant is going to grow. So the output is going to increase. So what the farmer does is, it takes the plant seeds, it grows it in very small pots, or you can say bottles or plastic bags containing very little amount of soil. Now, supposing out of these three, only two grew the plant. So it will take this plant and now only plant this in the field. It will reject the ones that is not growing. It increases the output and it decreases the amount of water taken in the field. It is a very important thing that we need to appreciate. Right. I'll see you in the next video and we will cover the remaining parts of the chapter. Thank you for tuning in.